save every one of us.
Do people even play this game anymore?
Dane, go! King of the impossible.
Well. Regardless, I have been summoned once more from the Viking-shaped coffin they keep me in and the dark, dank depths of the world. Things aren't looking so good, and I figured I'd give it one final push to right things before I finally dissolve into the internet's version of a snow crash. I mean, why get a degree in anthropology if you're not gonna give things the old college try, eh? And be unemployed. RJ Bass recently had an interview with Chris Lowry, the balance guy, and RJ began it by alerting everyone that he valued his privileged relationship with PGI, especially in material gains, over his journalistic integrity. Here's a clip.
And I personally try to maintain a good relationship with PGI and NG staff because I like to get free mechs and I like trips to Vancouver. I like to get free mechs and I like trips to Vancouver.
I like to get free mechs and I like trips to Vancouver.
What a brave man, that RJ Bass, putting it all on the line, letting Twitch users ask the hard questions he dared not, assuming they did in a respectful manner. As for me, well, PGI doesn't really shower me in microtransacted gifts, and while I'd love to have a working relationship with them, I have an even better working relationship with my mouth. That doesn't really sound right. So this is going to be a Jarl-rated video. As always, I'm making this video because I want the game to thrive, but as always, that means saying things that might make your PGI waifu pillows uncomfortable. Before I begin, I'd like to make a brief note on adaptations. Something that I think everyone needs to realize is that this game is a translation, an interpretation of a tabletop game into a fast-paced multiplayer shooter. It would be impossible for there to be a one-to-one direct copy of the tabletop game into the online one. Making the game fun, making the game playable has to take precedence over making the game exactingly accurate to lore. I know we've got some 90-year-old Battletech fans who've been playing the game since the Kaiser flew the Hindenburg into the Titanic, but they have to back up and give PGI some room to make this adaptation of what they love into a success in of itself. All right, we clear on that? We good? Good. Now on to balance, the whole reason I'm making this video. Balance has never been perfect. I've made videos in the past about its pitfalls, and it's probably the sort of thing a free-to-play game can never really get right. But it can still be going in the right direction. And in the last year or so, it has, like Britney Spears, swung wildly out of control, at least like 10 years ago, and over a bridge and stopped being fun entirely. The game is drowning. This Ragnarok, this Balance-ageddon that we find ourselves living in can be traced back to the Great Rescale. You see, prior to the Rescale, there had been a few outlier mechs that either suffered or thrived due to scale. Terragato made his famed scale chart, and the community managed to make enough noise that PGI relented. They created a poll and asked which mechs the community wanted rescaled, and the community, it voted for, in general, the worst defenders, and hopes were on the rise. But then, out of the blue, PGI announced they were rescaling everything. You get a rescale, you get a rescale, you get a rescale. A massive undertaking in this game. They asked for no feedback. They didn't publicly test any of the rescales. They just dumped them on us. And what a dump it was. The mechs who were suffering the most from the previous scale were mediums. There were, of course, outliers and other weights like the catapult or the quick draw, etc. But when a heavy is roughly the same size as a medium, has almost the same speed and agility as a medium, and carries more weapons than a medium, then why would you ever bother bringing a medium? The hope was that with smaller profiles, the mediums would be more competitive. But the vast majority of mediums didn't get any smaller. Instead, most of the 35-ton mechs ended up in shambles. The volumistic scaling PGI used made them huge. In a single patch, all 35-ton mechs became trash. Jenners, Firestarters, and Panthers were tossed upon the altar of balance and never seen again. The Zeus, a mech that struggled since release to reach the dizzying heights of averageness and mediocrity, was made huge, relegating it forever to the trash tier without mega quirks. The Wolfhound didn't really make a comeback until mega quirks compounded with the skill tree, and specifically medium IS pulse buff during the energy rebalance made it better later on. This, I would say, have said, am saying, is where it began. The first grand mistake. Despite this, though, weapon balance continued to improve. This eventually reached what much of the competitive community considers peak balance in this game. It was March 2017. The EMP Star League tournament was going strong, and Skill Tree had been, mercifully, delayed. During this rare window, we saw multiple types of weapons and decks functioning at the highest levels of competitive play. SRM and small post brawling was strong, but so too was Gauss and PPC trading. So was Laser Vomit. It was so good, in fact, that bracket builds and bracket decks were becoming common. Let me explain that. You see, for some time, one of the prevailing theories in the highest circles of play has been unified weapon ranges. Being able to put 100% of your firepower on a single mech at a single moment has been demonstrably stronger than mixed amounts of damage at mixed ranges at mixed times. This is true for single mechs and entire teams. This is why builds and drop decks are standardized and voted in well-coordinated teams. And yet, during this renaissance of balance, I don't speak French. Competitive teams were beginning to bring mechs that had diverse weapon ranges on them. For instance, we'd see ERPPC range mechs taking small pulse lasers, not because the old doctrines about mixed weapons were wrong, but because in this brave new world of balance, the danger of differently ranged weapons could no longer be ignored. This expanded the team dynamic as well. You were seeing more teams drop with range and brawl mechs at the same time. This is balance. Range wasn't so good that there was no point in taking brawl, and brawl wasn't so good that there was no point in taking range. Despite the death of 35-ton mechs, a few lighter mechs shined, especially the Locust, one of the rare winners from the Rescale, which, due to its stutter step, could be extremely deadly when piloted by someone who knew what they were doing. And then, like Twilight Rome before the barbarians, this glorious age came to an abrupt end. Skill Tree was released. I tried to stay positive. I tried to figure it out because, let's be honest here, it was a lot. It was so much, in fact, that some people just packed up their mechs and quit. But I wanted a new skill tree. I wanted the ability to customize our mechs beyond the stale mastering lifestyle we had been raised on. I was always a fan of the concept. But the final product destroyed the previous balance and has been a major impediment to fixing it ever since. Not only that, but it's just too much. Everyone who owns more than a handful of mechs knows this. Anyone that pulls an old dusty mech out of mothballs and gets it ready to run again, only to realize they have to manage 200 and something frickin' nodes and plan out a path for 91 of them just to get back into the game on top of adjustments in the mech lab. They have experiences firsthand. We've all been dropping when either you or a unit member decides to try out an old mech or a new build, and everyone ends up waiting 15 minutes for them, and it's just gets ridiculous. There is too many nodes. Cut the nodes in half. Cut the nodes in thirds. You'll lose a little more than an absurd amount of clicking. The values are so insignificant on their own that reducing and consolidating would lose virtually nothing and save us all some time and sanity. What makes it even worse is that there is a clear meta to the nodes. Firepower and survivability trump maneuverability, which means that all of our mechs are slower, they handle worse, they are less enjoyable to pilot. Not to mention that probably more importantly than how it feels, this skill tree meta hurts mobile play styles like brawling disproportionately than non-mobile play styles like laser vomit, which we'll touch on again in a little bit. I have to take a moment to explain why maneuverability is getting the shaft in skill tree implementation. Elsewise, PGI can just say, oh, the reason he has these problems, is because he is choosing to allow mechs to handle like a cockroach in molasses. Okay, that was a terrible Canadian accent. I'm sorry, Canadians. First off, the mobility tree is lackluster in its implementation. Despite requiring a heavy investment in nodes, it actually adds very little to your mech's overall agility. We've tested this extensively. A mech whose base agility is trash, like the Timberwolf, will get a negligible boost from the tree due to the nodes being percentage based. Meanwhile, a mech whose agility is pretty decent, like the Ebon Jaguar, does so well without the mobility tree's boost that it's more economical to spend those points elsewhere. So either way, you're not using the tree. This is further compounded by the fact that mobility can be negated by proper planning and positioning far easier than extra firepower or armor can. How fast a mech's weapons recycle so you can fire again in a tight fight, or doing more damage to an enemy mech at a certain range, or how cool your mech is for repeated shots are all going to make a much larger difference in a fight than if your torso can turn 5% more in any given direction. Only in lights, where survivability is more directly linked to mobility, do you see any reason at all for that tree to be used. But that wasn't all PGI did to hinder maneuverability, because Skill Tree was not launched alone. No, it had a partner in ruin, the disastrous engine Desync. Now, at the time, I was also a fan of this move. In theory, engine desync should have allowed PGI to tweak mech's agility and acceleration, deceleration on an individual basis. They could surgically enhance mechs that needed an extra boost, or rein in mechs that needed to be toned down a little. My enthusiasm for this soon waned, however, as it became clear that they were never actually going to do this. It's been more than half a year since they desunk the engines, and hardly any mechs have been individually altered since then in a positive way. Some nerfs have been done to overperformers, but agility stats have largely remained the same on all mechs since the rushed through, mostly untested, and seemingly arbitrary values PGI gave them in the first place. Desync virtually killed the Locust, which lost its stutter step. It became an easier target for enemy pilots. They did get some values right on Desync launch, to their credit, but certainly not all. Most damningly, though, after 6 months, they've done almost nothing. They've done no tweaking or anything with it. They've just left it. By this point, things were getting muddled. Warning signs were going off. But there was still hope. Hope for something better. Hope that future patches would fix the most glaring issues. Hope. But the engines were never touched again, and the skill tree was never trimmed. Our mechs were no longer fun to play. Add to this the other skill tree legacy, the overpowering of consumables. With double cool shots, teams could start running alpha mechs. Mechs that previously would have overheated too early could now fire their huge alphas much longer into a fight, relying on 2 cool shots instead of 1, both more potent than the old ones. Airstrikes and artillery also became much more deadly and easy to abuse, just bringing down a constant rain of unskilled damage onto mechs from all sides. PGI has since nerfed the cooldown on both cool shots and strikes, but they still fill an uncomfortably powerful niche in the game and amount to little more than just grotesque damage spam. The next assault on decency, the salting of our already wounded Earth, was when PGI turned their attention to our weapons. This is a perfect time to discuss energy rebalance. It happened in June, 1 month after skill tree and engine desync. 1 month after this new tech was being released and the timeline being advanced. They were supposed to use 1 month's worth of data on skill tree right after its release to rebalance all energy weapons. Think about it. You might know nothing about anything. Y'all might be a country cousin who plays MWO on your printer screen, and you never learned what damn little squiggles mean in your books. But even you know that relying on 1 month's worth of data to make these kinds of decisions is absurd. Now, this rebalance was mostly done through a large series of nerfs. Let's start with the Clan Small Pulse Laser, because it's the biggest elephant in the room, full of elephants. The Clan Small Pulse was reduced by a whopping 1/3 of its damage. Now, the reason behind this is perhaps valid. PGI needed to introduce a new weapon, the Heavy Small, 6 damage weapon, but the role of a 6 damage laser was already occupied by the Clan Small Pulse, so PGI needed to make room. Therefore, the Clan Small Pulse was shifted away from the high alpha role and more into a DPS role, which is a sensible move, but despite carefully adjusting every stat on the weapon, PGI ended up with a small pulse that couldn't even outbrawl a regular ER small, and so, predictably, Clan Small Pulse lasers have fallen into disuse. However, the real fault in PGI stars in this story is letting the situation persist for over 6 months without improvement, which is perhaps, you might have noticed, a theme. And then, just to add insult to injury, Clan Heavy Smalls didn't turn out good either. The Clan Heavy Small lasers deal 6.5 damage, which is greater than the original Small Pulse, but they have more restrictive ghost heat. So not only do they have worse duration, worse range, worse DPS, but they also have less alpha, which defeats the purpose of an alpha-centric weapon. So now we have underperforming weapons on top of underperforming weapons. I could go on and on, even about small pulse lasers. Take the IS small pulse, for example. Here was a weapon that was barely used, certainly not overpowered by any means, with only average damage and a restrictively short range that had its damage reduced by 13% for no obvious reason. If there ever was a case for a nerf simply for nerf's sakes or of nerfing via spreadsheet, then this is it. We have arrived at peak PGI. But that wasn't the last the Inner Sphere heard from PGI and their inane tweaks and nerfs. Oh no! Late in Deep Fall, PGI nerfed the cooldown times on medium lasers. They did this to Inner Sphere and Clan lasers, but this demonstrated a fundamental lack of understanding in the differences between the two factions' weapon systems. For you see, the Inner Sphere medium lasers always leverage their faster rate of fire to stay competitive with the Clan medium lasers. That's because Clan mediums are used for more poke and fade style combat, while the IS mediums are more for shaking in your face. Well, we're on the subject. I could go into the disastrous normalization of heat sinks between IS and clans that destroyed another example of balance through differentiation in this game, but I just don't have any time to hit on everything. Either way, these examples just highlight more balance by spread cheating and more disconnect between PGI and the actual game. On top of all of this, in the past 8 months, there have been SRM nerfs, Gauss nerfs, and more heat changes. It didn't matter that energy weapons are the overperformers. Every other system has received nerf after nerf after nerf. The end result of this giant mess has been the destruction of multiple playstyles. Clan laser vomit and sluggish mechs has become the king, and has been the king for a while now. Pop-Tarts and brawlers and all but a few DACA builds have fallen by the wayside. Throughout the history of this game, balance has never really been great. But throughout all the Quirkenings and Lermageddons and constant faction play mismatches, it has always been fun. But what PGI is doing now, what is happening to this game, is a reduction of that fun. As the playstyles merge and the mechs blend into some formless puddle of beige and unappetizing sameness, the joy just leaks out. Before we summarize, let's backtrack a little and take a moment to discuss the curious case of the Kodiak. This unbalanced and maybe unhinged mech was born to a strange world where long toms reigned supreme and faction play was broken. Oh, well, faction play's still broken. Guess it's not that different from today. Anyways, the Kodiak. It became the darling of every competitive team's assault mech core, and it could disintegrate enemy mechs with little more than a firm yet knowing glance. Specifically, of course, the Kodiak 3, with an honorable mention from the Spirit Bear. The Kodiak, as we know, was an obscenely overpowered mech when it was released. Even we, the players, knew this before release, yet somehow PGI didn't. They gave almost every Kodiak 10 plus structure everywhere with massive amounts of agility quirks. They gave those quirks to the two most powerful Kodiaks that I already mentioned. Now, they did remove most of the quirks in 2 months, which is surprisingly fast for PGI, but the question remains, how did PGI get this so utterly wrong? It still took them 6 months to remove the remaining structure quirks on the Kodiak 3, and nerfed the Kodiak's torso twist angles, which, while the correct course of action, took far too long to implement and surprised no one, because that's about par for PGI. Meanwhile, while the saga of the Kodiak marched on, other things were afoot. The Origins 2C mechs had established themselves more than just your regular everyday mech porn. The Hunch 2C was the most powerful mech in its class. The Jenner 2C became a contender for one of the best lights in the game. The Orion 2C was one of the best clan brawlers available. The Marauder 2C release was only a few months away, if not released, and the Supernova a few months after that. All of these mechs became the strongest mechs in the game. What do they have in common? They're all clan battle mechs. Clan mechs with clan tech that have the same customization options as Inner Sphere mechs, i.e. changing engine sizes, endosteel, ferro armor, etc. They were not limited by the design structure limitations of available tonnage and slots imposed by the Omni technology. They introduced a power creep into the game greater than any before it. The Kodiak in particular, due to the amount of tonnage available for the weapons while still moving faster than most Intersphere heavies and not dying on side torso destruction on top of it all. By introducing this style of mech to the game, PGI broke any semblance of balance between the Intersphere and the clans, and most other mechs compared to clan battle mechs. It made quirks necessary on just about every single mech in the game. Many weapon systems had to be nerfed and tweaked and nerfed again to account for what these clan battle mechs can achieve as weapons platforms. The only way out of this cactus-filled cave of their own making would be to give the Intersphere the other half they are missing from the deadly combo. They have the customization, but not the weapons and equipment platforms to compete. Now, all that said, the debate around shared tech is long and much more complex and probably worth another video in its own right. For now, I just don't have time, a reoccurring theme you might have noticed. So what does this all mean? We have the Rescale, we have the skill tree, the engine desync, the wide-scale weapon nerfs to range in the wildly overperforming mechs. All these different little strands coming together to create a perfect storm of blah. Of a game that stops being fun. Balance is a tricky beast, and I doubt it is all Chris's fault. If there's one thing I took away from his interview with RJ Bass, it is that he is only the face of a 5-headed monster, PGI's balance team. The one thing about Chris is, as far as we can tell, he's the only PGI developer who really plays this game. If we include his Spiral Face account, we see that he's in the top 15% of the most active players in this game. Maybe the rest of the balance team doesn't listen to him and forces him to take these poorly thought out paths. Either way, my greatest fear is that we have people making balance decisions, or perhaps overriding Chris, or maybe just indulging his bad inclinations, who never enjoyed the game in the first place. People who never thought it was fun, unknowingly making it unfun for the rest of us who've enjoyed it. I know PGI hates criticism. I know they hate us players acting like we know anything, and they think we're a bunch of trolling malcontents, a bunch of neck-bearded islanders. I shave mine. But PGI, I'm not your enemy. I'm making this video because if all my unit mates, if all my friends quit playing this and wander off to play Warframe or PUBG or Overwatch or whatever, then I'll be left alone here in this game, in which case we both lose. Me, and you, PGI. So turn this around before it's too late, because by every metric I have, from the Jarl's list, to running the FRR Karita Faction Hub, to managing my own unit and competitive team, everything I see shows me that we are on the verge of collapse. We need to make a change, and we need to do it now. I have addressed the issues. I've brought them up. But what now? What next? I recommend you talk to the community. I recommend you talk to Terragato. That's all. Maybe I'll make more videos. Maybe people will start playing this game again. Maybe we can have fun. Jarl Dane, signing out.
Dane, Jarl, king of the impossible. He's for every one of us, stand for every one of us. Oh.